We've been talking about a lot of the good stories that we can tell our kids. Are there stories that we should avoid telling them?
Actually, there are stories which definitely you don't want to tell your kids by any means, under any circumstances. Number one, because you will never run out of authentic and beautiful stories, whether Quranic or prophetic stories, and. Secondly, there are stories which you should really avoid. Some of the scientific fiction stories, they won't do your kid any good at all. Like Superman, Batman, the Ninja Turtles, and all of that. Scientifically speaking, they would only make your child get depressed, because that, Islamically speaking, that seeing the situation of the Ummah, your child one day is interested in liberating Baytul Maqdis in Jerusalem and so on. So instead of taking the serious measures and the proper means to be to prepare him and herself to be strong believers to carry on this mission, and instead of that, we just live in dreams that one day I will grow wings and I will fly and I will liberate Jerusalem and I will take care, So those stories actually, they will not do your kid any good. You should really avoid, because you do not expect your child that will have wings one day or will start flying. So bring to their mind something which is achievable, something which is reasonable and logical. This is one of the kind of the stories which you should really avoid. Also, horror stories, fear and scary stories and so on. And that's why somebody was asking me about a book which is called Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm. Harry Pagan, that's what I call it.
Actually, it's one of the best-selling books worldwide and so on. However, we don't go with the flow, because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us that a Muslim is a leader, is not a tail. Saying that one of you should not be an imma, a tail, that says, well, if people are going in this direction, I just go with the flow. No. If people are going in the right direction, join them. But if people are going in the wrong direction, even if you are by yourself, be a gharib, be a stranger, that's fine. فَطُوبَى لِلْغُرَبَاءِ. So, if everybody is buying this book, this video game, this movie, and you know that you have really to spend time to screen everything before letting your children get exposed to the danger of the thing, especially items which are imported from outside. Also, novels, love stories, especially for children until the teenage. They're not really supposed to be exposed to such kind of stories.
Romantic stories.
Romantic love, and sometimes some stories have some sexual explicit and so on. You should really avoid anything like that to be related to your children. And make sure that you screen and you know what your children are reading, whether at school or in public libraries, or that what you yourself or somebody else is telling or relating your kids of stories.
Make sure it's authentic.
Do you want to say something? No, I wanted to say what kind of stories that I can tell my child, like I know the Quran is full of stories, but what other
Remember,
stories?
Hussam, I just mentioned earlier that alhamdulillah, shukla, as a Muslim, you will never run out of authentic and sound stories which give meanings and teach lessons and benefits. There are so many kind of different stories. We begin with the Quranic stories. The Quran is full of beautiful stories which would help us raise our children in the proper way. And there are stories like Surah Al-Kahf. Surah Al-Kahf I consider is a complete curriculum. That you can start relating to your children some of the stories of Surah Al-Kahf at the age of 7, at the age of 10, then 15, then 20, then 30, and at the age of 40, people will continue to listen to the stories of Surah Al-Kahf over and over, and every age level would acquire new benefits, would catch up. Exactly. We still learn more and more out of the stories of Surah Al-Kahf. This is such a beautiful surah. Surah Al-Kahf contains the stories of the people of the cave. That's why it was named Al-Kahf, the cave. And that how Allah saved them because of their faith and belief and so on, and the miraculous life of them. Surah Al-Kahf talks about the stories of Sayyiduna Musa alayhi salam with the righteous man Al-Khidr. Very, very interesting stories. Surah Al-Kahf talks about a king who ruled the east and the west with justice, Dhul Qarnayn. So you have so many Quranic stories. There are animal stories in the Quran which will be of a great interest for your children.
Like the ant of Sayyidina Sulaiman.
The ant of Sayyiduna Sulaiman.
The whale.
The whale of Sayyiduna Yunus, peace be upon him. Al-Hudhud. And you know, it's very interesting. Al-Hudhud, the hoopoe, it translates to English as a hoopoe. H-O-O-P-O-E. This bird, which you might not find in a Western society, is an amazing bird. And you can teach so many lessons from the story of the hoopoe, Sayyiduna Sulaiman alayhi salam. Beginning with a child, ending up with a da'iyah, with a big speaker, you know. This is such a marvelous story. Sayyiduna Sulaiman have so many stories with the jinn, with ants, with the ant, with the, you know. Also, the dog of the people of the cave, you know. The she-camel of Sayyiduna Salih alayhi salam. So you can actually focus on a complete course of the animals in the Quran. You know. This has a great attraction to the children.
Animals,
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming to the prophetic stories, I remember once you mentioned the book of the seal nectar, also the book of Riyadh al-Salihin, the garden of the pious, that the Prophet ﷺ in the book relates to us so many sound stories.
The three men who the
Exactly.
rock rolled in front
This
of the cave.
is such a beautiful story, the three men who got locked up in a cave, and what saved them, their righteousness. Even one of them that he did not really do any good thing, but rather he was about to do something that was bad, and he stopped out of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because of that, they were rewarded too, and he was saved. So here you see that stories have a great impact, not only on the children, but also on adults.
It's like when we were saying it, I want to hear it again. You know, like when you said it, I want to hear it again and again.
Exactly. You want to attract your child to learn about repentance, forgiveness, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forgiving and the most merciful, and He never turns anybody's repentance down as long as he applies it the proper way. Talk about the story of the man who killed 99, you know? And the effect of giving the wrong advice is the man who said, no, that God will never forgive you, and then the murderer killed him and
slaughtered his head right away.
Yes. So this is a very interesting story. You can also talk about being grateful and the effect of being grateful in your life and receiving more and more from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a very interesting. There is a very interesting story which is in Sahih Imam al-Bukhari about three people, a blind man and a leper and
a bald man.
And a bald-headed man. Yes, not
like
you,
me.
of course.
He
He was naturally bald-headed.
That touched me. That story touched me.
Well, it touches every believer. And the only man who was saved, you know, there is no really enough time to discuss all those stories, but I'm just, you know, opening windows, because it's not mere stories. No. You relate the story, meanwhile you keep in mind, maybe even you need to write down the lessons which you learn and teach your children out of this story, especially the story of the three people, the blind and the leper and the bald-headed. Yes.
I want to say something, but besides the stories that has a point or something to teach the child, I think we have a lot of stories, because a lot of people think that Islam, or we never had any funny stories or any like nice stories that you just can get laughter out of the child, you know. I think we can do that too, like the story of Sayyidina Umar when he ate his ilah. It cracks me up. And also the story about the two companions that sold each other. When he remember the companion who sold his friend?
No, I don't remember that.
Okay. It's
But anyway, yes, as I said, once again, we will never run out of authentic and sound stories. Some stories are to provide manners, good behavior, akhlaq, and so on. And some stories are just to strengthen faith in the heart of the believer. Some stories to tell you that the future is bright. especially the stories of the hijrah, the immigration of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the sufferings of the prophets before Sayyiduna Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that there was always light by the end of the tunnel and so on. But before we go ahead and discuss some of the few stories which are very, very recommended to discuss, that we have to understand that stories, as much as they're recommended and a very important tool in educating your child and establishing the foundation of aqidah, manners, and otherwise, it's not a medicine that the child have to take it as a dose. It's time to take the story. No. The story, you relate it whenever the child wants to hear it. If the child is bored of a particular story, then change the subject. But if the child is not in the position where that he wants to hear a story, then don't relate a story. The story always have to be interesting and attractive, And there is a very important thing that we have to notice while relating a story to our children. Besides that the story have to have an aim, a goal, benefits and lessons and so on, that you should not be the only person who's relating as a radio. No. The children at different ages have to participate. I have to admit that when I was working at a school, that I have found that the best tool ever to reach to the hearts of the students with their different ages was stories. And I have found that the best stories ever, the stories from the Quran and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They made the kids race to come to classes. Can't wait. And never, ever forget what they were told.
Inshallah.
So remember, you have to have them interact with you. You stop at a certain point and say, so guess what happened? Like, the story of Sayyiduna Musa a.s. when he was followed by the Pharaoh and his soldiers. Then imagine what happened to Musa a.s. that the sea in front of him, and he's been trapped between the sea and the Pharaoh and his soldiers. I want you to have your child imagine what could have happened. Try to find
create an image in your mind.
The feelings and the emotions racing through everybody's
heart. And now would come the solution, the miracle which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided to Sayyiduna Musa alayhi salam. So the child really have to play a role. There is a very important fact also that the stories can play an important role as a way of reward and punishment. So that if the child is behaving, I'm going to relate the story to you. If not,
I'm going to punish you.
Punishment. Maybe tomorrow.
But if my child is not interested in
I think it's that time.
Yeah, I think it's time for us to roll out to make the salat, inshallah ta'ala.
We'll be back, inshallah, after salah.
Inshallah.
Many people trying to get together, but all their efforts were in vain because of ignoring or turning away from this great foundation. We see many people coming to the way of truth, following the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but later on, they get off track. What is the reason behind that? Unity is a result, it's not a cover-up. We have to be united from inside. And Allah made this clear in the Quran when He said, وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ.
As we were saying, I want to ask something. Like, when I'm saying the story, I know sometimes the kids, they like, I have to keep up with him all the time, and I have to, how to say that? I mean,
make sure he's awake.
Yeah, make sure he's awake, make sure he's like giving me all his senses.
Definitely required that the child is paying attention, because it doesn't make sense to keep playing a radio.
Because I like the story, so I'm saying, he's sleeping, I'm continuing the story.
Every part of the story is of a great importance, especially if it is a prophetic story or a Quranic story, So don't waste the chance. The child is interested.
And I relate it to these days.
Exactly.
What's happening these days, and to something that he's doing. So I tell him, like remember when you did this? It's the same thing. God is watching. But
imagine that relating a story while the child is hungry. or while the TV is on, or he's so sleepy, then it's just a waste.
They will not learn anything.
No,
Exactly.
To be thinking about a peanut butter and banana sandwich. when I was a kid, my grandmother used to tell me bedtime stories, and she always tell my grandmother's a Scottish nationalist.
They are the best.
And she'd always tell me the story of William Wallace only. So I know the story of William Wallace inside and out. And I've known it since I was probably 3 or 4 years old. I can say it verbatim with no breaks. Is this the best time to tell?
Do you know that
stories?
scientifically speaking, that bedtime stories remain as long as a person is alive,
Yeah.
remain in the mind. They're very, very effective.
Very true.
Bedtime story is very, very effective. And it's also a relief for the child before
Sleep.
going to sleep. And the mother really have to relate the story, or if the father maybe, in a very soft, beautiful voice. And of course, you'll be very selective. You will choose what kind of story you relate, so that the child will have a nice dream. Actually, that strengthens the ties between the child and the mother, especially going to sleep. The last thing that he witnesses and sees, a beautiful, careful, loving, caring mother relating to him a story and putting him to sleep. That strengthens the ties of love and passion between the child and his parents, whether the father or the mother.
Yeah, I was
So
just to say
bedtime
that
stories are the best.
Because I was going to be jealous of the mother because I wanted to say the story.
You
I
can
tell the
compete
story.
with her. You can do that. Sure, you can do that.
So we could switch places. Today it's my turn. It's your turn
The
tomorrow.
mother should be more caregiving than the father.
Sometimes if the kid is not as big and it's still at a small, tender age, we can still give them the story to train them of listening to story.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, you have to be very intelligent in choosing the proper story, You don't relate a story which is above the age, the proper age, where the child will be confused. He doesn't know what you're talking about, Also, just picking on what you guys were talking about, that whether the father or the mother, and that we envy each other, that you're talking to the kids. Raising the children is not the responsibility of either one alone. It is the responsibility of both parents. Everyone have to play a role. I know that the father spends lesser time with the children because the fact that he has to go to work and provide for the family and so on. But it's the best time that which you spend with your family members, with your kids, and watch them as they grow
up.
and maybe spend some time with them before they sleep. So do not waste any opportunity. Do not say the mother is doing it all. No, it is not sufficient.
Well, how can we tell these stories and helping them how can it benefit them in terms of lying and cheating? And,
You're talking
yeah.
about eliminating bad
Yeah.
habits. Also that can be treated by stories. And the best will be in that is the Quran. For instance, jealousy, envy, and things like that. The story of Qabil and Habil, the two sons of Adam,
Cain and
out of
Abel
Surah
in English.
Al-Ma'idah. It's beautiful. When Qabil said to Habil, لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ, I shall kill you. And Habil, the soft-hearted man, the pious man, even though they were brothers, but one showed righteousness and one showed wickedness. He said that, well, if you try to kill me, I will not try to even defend myself or kill you. No, I will not try to attack you back. Why? First, listen. إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهَ رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Because I fear Allah, the Lord of all that exists. So now, you nail down and establish the foundation of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is one of the components of taqwa. Second, which Qabil still did kill his brother. The brother said, if you try to kill me, I will not try to defend myself, I will not attack you back, because inni akhafu Allah Rabbal Alameen. When the brother killed his own brother, what was the result? Satan won. He received him, but the damage is irreversible. It's not fixable. The brother is already dead. So Qabil realized that he have killed his own brother. And he didn't know what to do with the body. He's been carrying the body. And you can just quickly pass by this, especially if the child is very young. The concept of killing and so on. Then that you have to emphasize on the concept of that Qabil afterward regretted. فَأَصْبَحَ مِنَ النَّادِمِينَ. He regretted that he killed his brother. You know? So the story will teach us piety and righteousness. Will teach the child the bad influence of envy and jealousy. Because basically what Qabil killed his brother for was jealousy. You know? And of course before the story, why? Because every one of them offered a charity which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted only from Habil, not from Qabil. So Qabil was mad and he envied his brother. Why? Well, Habil's charity was accepted because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. This is what Habil tried to explain to his brother, that you could have your charity accepted if you offer it with taqwa. So now you have the concept of taqwa, which is one of the most important subjects and foundations of faith in the life of a Muslim. You can address it from the story of Qabil and Habil. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only accepts the person who's right, accepts the acts of worship or the charity or of a person who is righteous and pious.
When you were talking about this story, it reminded me of how Muhammad ﷺ told this story to the companions. He said there will come a time of a fitna, and they said, what if the fitna is our house? And he said, be like the better son of Adam.
The other lesson which you just picked on, which is killing is an evil act, is actually one of the worst sins, you know, especially killing a believer without a just reason, you know. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the end concludes the story by saying that we have ordained that one who kills a single human soul without a just reason, he is as he has killed all mankind. So now we emphasize on the evil effect of even thinking about murdering or killing somebody else. This is versus playing with video games or Nintendo games, which is all about killing. Assassinating, violence, and so on.
Mike Tyson's Punch Out. Yeah.
No.
So you're creating, looking at the games, you're creating something in the minds of the children,
No.
you know, that is not very good.
Exactly, you have to screen that before allowing them to play it or use it. So remember, before just opening a book and reading from a book a story to your child, you have to study it, you have to learn it, and you have to know what exactly the story means. And you have to write down the subjects which you're going to address with your child. If you want to treat a certain illness in your child, like hasad, lying, stealing, dishonesty, and so on, you choose the proper story and you start picking on that. Do not accuse your child he's such and such. Rather relate to him a story which will correct that evil act in him, because he's just a child. Your son is not you, he's just a child, and he's fixable, and you can fix him and fix his attitude and his behavior through stories. There is a very important story that we should really keep relating and mentioning to our children at different ages, which is the story of the construction of the Kaaba as the first masjid and house to Allah was built on earth. The story establishes not only the Kaaba and the foundations of the Kaaba, it establishes the foundation of belief and aqidah. You know, many kids when they go to school in Western societies and they hang around with the non-Muslim kids, there is the concept of, well, everyone is going to paradise. It's like, you know, we're all driving on the same highway, but riding different cars. So whether you're a Muslim or a non-Muslim, you'll end up in paradise as long as, you know, you're nice to others,
As long as you're a
which
good
is
person.
not necessarily true. No, that's totally wrong. So in this case, the story of Sayyiduna Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salam, and what they advised their offspring, and then we'll take it from there to Sayyiduna Yaqub, Jacob. You know, Ibrahim and Ismail were two Muslims, and they prayed and asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to maintain Islam in their offspring. And Yaqub asked his offspring, his children, before his death, مَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن بَعْدِي? What are you going to worship after me? قالوا, they said, نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق إلها واحدا ونحن له مسلمون. So Sayyidina Jacob's children said that we're going to worship your ilah. And the ilah, the God of your parents, your foreparents, Ibrahim, Ismail, Ishaq, who came before you. So that states the concept of Tawheed and the oneness of Allah, and that the only considered and accepted religion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Islam. So the conclusion would come, إِنَّ الدِّينَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ الْإِسْلَامِ. And you can begin as early as the age of 7, 8, 9 and up, talking about the stories which are related to belief and aqidah.
Before that, they're too young to understand.
They're too young really to grasp on the meaning of, aqidah issues and so on. Well, sometimes you notice that your child is growing fast and his mind is very open, that you can even give him more and more and more. So I would leave it up to the parent to decide whether the child is ready to hear that or not. Also the story of Abraha was trying to destroy the Kaaba and so on. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the protector.
No, that house has a Rab. That house has a Lord.
That house has a Rab.
I just want my sheep.
And he didn't really have to recruit an army or no. It was just an army of
The
birds.
So,
Surah Al-Fil. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِأَصْحَابِ الْفِيلِ. That will make the child ready to memorize Surah Al-Fil. I think it's time to go home and see our family and visit with our children. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.
Ba